Hello everyone and welcome to Will Builds episode 2. Um, we're going to try and build one of these guys. This is a Nerf gun, and this is actually a more aggressive Nerf gun than I've ever seen, like growing up. It shoots these little um, like foamy balls, which are kind of cool. And this project is actually a part of a project that we're doing at Ohio State in a Solidworks modeling class. I've asked all of the students in my class to build a Nerf gun to practice their Solidworks modeling skills. It's going to be a tough project. These things have a whole lot of detail. You can probably see in my detail cam over here, tons of little tiny features that we're going to have to model. And anyway, I'm going to probably break this build into a few different videos. Um, there's no way that I can get through this in one sitting, and probably certainly not like an hour. I'm going to try and keep these videos to about an hour. So over the course of the next few videos, just look for the, I guess, what's included in each build video in the description. And when I switch over to my display capture, that's going to be a good indication of what I'm working on in SolidWorks. So, Nerf build. I am going to take this apart and model the inside of these parts as well as all of the mechanical stuff. Eventually we're going to combine a whole bunch of different part files into an assembly file, and we'll see how much of this I decide to actually record. I know there's one specific thing that is going to give most of you guys building this at home some sort of trouble, and we'll see if we can get to that feature here pretty soon. So let me switch over to my display cam and open up SolidWorks. We're using a student edition of SolidWorks 2016 to 2017. And I guess we can talk a little bit about how I'm going to go about building this object. So I've had a chance to talk to a lot of my class already, and we're probably going to eventually end up with an assembly of a whole bunch of parts, but we're going to start with some basic part files. I like to work in millimeters, and I will be using a set of calipers to do most of my measuring. This is a cool measuring tool that lets me get very accurate measurements of my parts as I'm going through my build process. I'm also going to be using a sheet of paper and a pen to talk through some dimensions and talk about my build process in a little bit more detail. So why don't we start with some of that. So I'm going to switch to my desk capture cam here, and you're going to watch me do some drawing upside down, I guess, a little bit first. So we have our gun, and there are a whole bunch of different shapes. I need to find a way to break this down into something digestible. So I think what I'm going to do is start by building the main body of my gun here as a solid, one single solid part, and sort of work my way from big features down to small features. All right. Probably going to start with just a simple, probably just a simple extrusion of a shape that looks something like this from the side. And I'm going to ignore like the bottom half of the gun here that turns into the handle. That part I'm probably going to build as a separate part. So there's a good chance like where my handle actually connects. Let me pull this gun out so you can kind of see it. I'm probably going to ignore, yeah, like the entire bottom half of this thing. So there's going to be more gun down here with the handle. I'm going to ignore that. So I'll start off with like a simple extrusion, I think. On top of that, let's see. So I'll have the same sort of extrusion going on. Then I'm going to start to build on and cut away with some simple extrude bosses and extrude cuts some of the other features here. So I see on the side, on the back, there's a feature that sort of pops out like this. So I'll start adding some of these things. It looks like I can probably build a few different like add-on features. There's a few stuff on top that I'll probably want to extrude up, something like this. And then there are a few features that I'll probably, once I extrude a few, let's see, I'll draw this one more time. Yeah, so I'll have some extruded features. I'll also want to like extrude cut some features out of this. So I'm going to take a shape that probably goes about this far back and like cuts a profile into my gun this way. So this shape that I'm cutting out will probably look something like this. And I'm extruding a cut this way. I'll probably do the same on the top to give this a little bit of a chamfer that goes back pretty far to sort of make one of the edges of my gun. It looks like there's a sort of a different chamfer on the back of this. And chances are I'm only going to do, if you can imagine this thing cut in half, I'm probably going to build this gun, just half of this gun to start. So if there's a plane that sort of you imagine cutting through this gun halfway, it's relatively symmetrical. So I'm probably going to just build half and then eventually move it. So once I do a few cuts and I have a few extrudes, I think you'll start to see some of the basic shape of this gun starting to exist, and you'll have a good idea of how I'm sort of building that. Eventually, I'll get to a point where like the main shape of my gun is looking pretty good. And if you imagine in this, let's see, I know these are kind of blurry here, so let's see, there's step 1, step 2, step 3, some extrude cuts, some extrude bosses. Eventually, in step 4, I'm going to want to hollow the inside of this thing out. And it's going to be sort of a balance to figure out how I'm going to hollow it out with a shell. But once I have like my main shape, if I flip this thing over, we should end up having something that looks relatively plain on the backside, and on, I guess, the other side, we're going to have a whole bunch of these like crazy extrusions and things that I've added as features to this gun. Probably not a lot of the smallest stuff, but definitely most of like the main features I will want to be a part of the shell so that they appear on the inside as well. So if you can see, I kind of like flipped this part down, and then when I hollow it out with my shell feature, I'll be left with sort of like the inside of my gun. And it should have some of the same basic features that were on like the outside of this gun to begin with as well. Alright, so that's sort of the basic process I'm going to go through. Let's switch back to display and start cracking. So I'm going to start out in Solidworks, and I'm not necessarily working from a master sketch yet. I'm going to kind of just hack this thing together as I go to get a good feel for how it might come together. I'm going to start out with just like the main shape on the back of the gun here, and I'm going to take a couple dimensions. So right off the bat, I'm going to draw, I guess from the front plane, a sketch. And I'm going to start with just a really simple, like half of this thing. And let's find some dimensions for this. So this is, I'm just going to measure from like the widest part of like the main area of this gun here. It looks like I can probably do about 55 divided by 2. So I'm cutting all of these like width dimensions in half because I'm only building half of this at a time. I think I'm only going to do the white section of this thing, so it looks like I can get away with about Okay, about 62. Okay, and then let's figure out how long we need this thing to extrude. And I'm kind of working from the back here. And that is pretty long. I might actually have to use my calipers to measure a couple different things in a row here. So I'm going to do like 150 and then measure again. So 150 gets me to about there. Another 150 gets me to about there. So that's 300, and we'll go to right here. 300 plus another 100, 400. Nice round number. Okay. Looks just like a gun, can you tell? All right. From here, let's start adding some other features. So this kind of looks like I could build some stuff maybe from the side plane. So I'm going to sketch here, square up to it. It looks like I have a little bit of extra sticking out of the top of this thing. Let's find out how much extra. Okay, 3 millimeters. I have like an extra little hump sticking out of the top of this. It's about 3 millimeters tall here. And one important thing you'll notice is I have my origin set at a very obvious spot on this gun, sort of like the middle, outside edge. I guess this could be, maybe I'll do this as like the inside edge because I want to mirror across this plane eventually. That way I can dimension things from that point. Okay, how far forward is that? Looks like from my origin point it's 71 millimeters. How wide is it? Looks like it's about 47. Okay, and I want this to go like the full width of my piece here. So I'm just going to go right up to that surface here. Okay, that's part of it. What else do we have here? Looks like I can start to do a couple extrude cuts. I might actually go back really quick because I am kind of building this from, oh weird, let me get out of here. Okay, so I still have this right. I'm going to do an extruded cut from the front here. So I don't know, let me see if I can switch back over to my desk cam. So you can kind of see that from the front, my gun kind of has a smaller bottom area than it does top area. And if we look at the side of the gun, you can kind of see these chamfered edges coming in on the gun. So I'm going to do an extruded cut to kind of add those in. So my camera's like kind of upside down. Alright. So I'm going to sketch on this front plane and figure out what that's like. And I actually have like a little bit of extra like extra white material down there too. I might have to add that in first. You know what? There are a couple ways I could do this. So I'm just going to sketch right on that front surface the shape that it looks like I'm going to have to cut out. Oops, didn't mean to hit new. And I did not mean for that. That added like a midpoint constraint in there. That's not what I want. Basically cut out something like this. Alright, how far down does that go from my origin point? Looks like it's kind of a tricky thing to measure. Starts about 41 millimeters down from here. That section comes in about 5.5 millimeters. And it's about millimeters here. Okay, and let's go ahead and extrude this back. How far back does it go? It goes most of the way. I guess it misses about 70 millimeters. So 330 millimeters. Got it. Okay. Now it looks like I have another chamfer. They're sort of cut up top, and actually another thing I need to sort of extrude from the top too. So let's try this. It looks like I need to draw on here again. I'm going to cut out a chunk that's something like that. Actually, it's even a little bit different than that. It looks like we actually have something like that going on all the way back. So how far from the outside is that thing? And probably for a lot of this more aesthetic stuff, you're going to have to kind of give it your best measurement, best guess possible. About 6. All the way into the top here is about looks like 10. And how tall is that here? About 2 millimeters. Alright, how far out does that go? Oh, I see. That's already kind of taken care of. How far down does that go? $17. Let's try that again. Okay. Extrude this back. We're going to go all the way back to this surface. Or if it doesn't want me to do it to that surface, I guess I could go to this vertex here. Oops. Wrong thing. I want to start from the sketch plane and go up to this surface. Okay. That's looking pretty good. Alright, we're starting to get something that's resembling some overall geometry on this gun. That's good. Alright, what else do we have here? It looks like I've got a big old like boss extrusion on yeah. Alright, so we're going to start on this plane. Square up. And it looks like kind of like a rounded box. So we'll do a corner rectangle. Does it touch down there? Wow, it's actually like right on this surface. Kind of like this. Okay. How tall is it? It's about 30. 30 tall. It is about 127 wide. And I do have an easy way to dimension from so 10 from that point to here. Okay. And then it also has, and I'm gonna do these as a sketch fillet. It has corners that look to be about, it's like about a 5 millimeter radius on, oh, that can't be right. Okay, that's like a 3. This one I might just have to kind of eyeball a little bit. Okay, that's probably about right. Let's extrude this out. And how far back does it stick from that surface? Looks like about 8.5. 8.5 millimeters. Okay. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to save this thing, and I'm surprised I hadn't already. I'm going to throw this in my OSU stuff for this class. This is, I guess, what's the assignment, like 21, 20, 21. We'll make a new folder called lesson 20 demo. Or actually, I think it might be 21. And this is going to be my NERF gun. This is sort of like the main body. So main body part. Okay. So far, now I'm going to try something really quick. This will be our first attempt at a shell, just to see if what I have already will allow this thing to hollow out from the side that I'm predicting it should. So I'm going to use a shell and say get rid of this side and show preview. And I have a feeling the thickness of this plastic isn't going to be more than about, I don't know, 2 millimeters, 2 millimeters thick. Let's say like maybe 3, and see what happens here. See if I'm getting an error. No, it looks okay. So you can kind of see, I'm seeing a few of these like internal versions of the external features, and that's good. That means if this is where I eventually want to end up. What I'm going to try to do is, actually I'm going to delete this shell, and that was just sort of a test to see if I had any errors with my shell feature at this point in my build process. So far so good, so I'm going to keep going and adding a few more features to make this a little bit closer to the actual gun before I do my shell. Alright, so let's keep going. So it looks like I have a box that kind of sits on top of this that connects with this guy and goes up, actually goes up pretty far. And fortunately, that's something that should be pretty easy to measure. It's kind of where where you cock the gun to fire a ball comes into play. Alright, so we're going to do the same method, go to about 150, which is about the max of my calipers, and then measure again from another point. Actually, we'll go, it's like 117.5, and oh man, that thing moves. Alright, let's try this again. I have a slot on the inside that I can measure. It's 135.5. So this thing is going to be 135.5 plus this extra little bit, 21.8 plus, and I'm just taking a couple of measurements of my gun in different areas because the length of this piece is actually quite a bit longer. It's 19.2. That adds up really nice. And how wide is this thing? And I gotta remember I'm only measuring half of the width. It's about 14.3 wide. Okay, and let's extrude that up. How high does it go? That I can use the depth gauge on my calipers. It's like about 4.3 millimeters. 4.3. I'm going to measure that again. It actually looks a little bit different than it looks on my gun here. 4.2 and 5.5. I'm going to take a look at this sketch one more time. So it's 3 there. I'm going to actually remeasure this really quick. Because it looks like I may have found a little bit of inconsistency in some of these measurements that I was taking. So that is actually about 3.5. And surprisingly, before I did this feature, this top face is actually a little bit lower than this face here. So I'm going to go back to this little cut extrude and edit this sketch. Let's take a look at this. And I need to bring that whole thing down a little bit. It's 3.5 and it's supposed to be about 5.5. So I need to move that face 2 millimeters. So actually I'm going to try something even a little more special. So I'm going to roll back before that cut. And we're going to make a little adjustment with the move face. I'm going to go to direct editing and move this face the 2 millimeters I need to move it in the other direction and say OK. And chances are I'm going to get an error. Oh no, it seemed to have, because I dimensioned it from that face, it seems to have kind of kept it the way I need it to. Okay. And that actually looks more consistent with the gun. I needed this surface here to be sort of below that one. So I'm going to save really quick. Good. I'm just going to double check a couple other dimensions right here. 4.1 for this. And what did I say here? It's like 4.3. Okay, that's pretty close. It's within like margin of error for measuring. Okay. And where was my other dimension? Probably on this guy. If I edit that sketch, where did I dimension to? To the bottom of this guy. That's looking okay. Okay, I think we're still good. We can always tweak some of this stuff later. I'm going to save. Okay. A couple other things I need to add. It looks like I've got another sort of boss feature on the top here. I'm going to sketch on this. It's another extrusion up from the front. And it looks like it's where another plastic piece meets up with this. So I think it's just about the same width, maybe just a little bit narrower than my other piece here. My other like extrusion on the top of the gun. It's 12.0. Okay, and how far back does this go? Let's see, it goes back about 98 millimeters. Okay, and I'm seeing a gap in between this feature and the one behind it. So I'm going to extrude that up, and it's actually pretty small. Looks like it might be about it's like 1.5 millimeters. 1.5. That's pretty small. So actually for this one, because that's a pretty small feature, I'm going to go ahead and try my shell again. So let me save now that I've added a couple more features. And we're going to double check. And again, I think plastic is probably only about 2 millimeters. Let's see if it likes it. Okay, yep. And it got that little feature in the front too. Turn on perspective so you can kind of see what's going on. Okay, again, I'm not ready to shell this just yet, but I did want to test it to make sure things are looking okay. So we'll save and keep going with the build process. Let's find a few more of the large features on this that I can kind of model into place. All right, I see a couple. I'm actually going to draw. It looks like I could probably like, let's see, cut the back of this thing just a little bit. Yeah. Oh, I can definitely hack off the back of it. Okay, so I'm going to draw on this face here, square up to it, and we're going to do a cut that looks something like Yeah, there are a couple things that are going to happen here. Cool. So we're going to try and do something that's maybe a little more complex. It's going to come down, it's going to come back, it's going to come over, it's going to come down to the base of this thing here. And that's what I'm actually cutting away. So I'm going to just draw a box around the whole thing here. Okay. So first point, it's probably going to be easy to find. The dimension for is that tip that sort of touches my edge. That is about 42.5. From here down to here, about 42.5. All right. Looks like we have about 5.5 from here to here. That's 7.75. And then that is about 4. And it looks like that says about 6. So let's see. We might have a couple inconsistencies here. I'm going to add a few more dimensions. It looks like this guy comes in about 4.5. Comes in there about 2.5. Okay, that comes in about 6.5. And that little chamfer comes in about 4.5. Actually, I'm going to get out of this because I noticed something else. Let's try and measure this one more time. I can actually measure that angle a lot more accurately at 45. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this. And I was able to measure this with pretty good accuracy. 45, which changes things a little bit. Because I can measure that side and that pretty easily. That's looking a lot closer to what I'm seeing here. And I can even say it's like 4, and make it look like a 45 degree. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Let's extrude this cut through everything. So it goes all the way across. Okay, I'm going to save. Excuse me. Okay. We've got a couple other things I can add in here, namely like a big old chamfer coming from the back. So I'm going to sketch on, looks like this face. chamfer that comes up to the top here, comes down. It actually comes down like the whole way to this. I guess I am cutting away, so let's draw that in. How far in does it come? Good question. Oops, I managed to switch from millimeters to inches, like 3.5 millimeters. And that comes all the way through to here. Oops. It starts in the sketch plane and then goes up to this vertex right here. Yep. Okay. Save it. Okay. Now I've got, where did I measure here? Our main extrusion was 27.9 times 2. Which is 54, 55, 8, I guess. Okay, I see where that is. Good, because I need to change a couple things as well with this. So I'm going to sketch on the back here. Oh, I see. Okay. I could probably actually cut that from is that my front plane? Yeah, good. So I'm going to sketch on the front plane. This whole thing is chamfered. Pretty much from here in. So it's going to be from right there. It comes in. How far does it come in? How wide is it at the base? It is about 24.8. Let's just say 25. And that comes in and actually intersects with another shape. So I only need to come in maybe about 20 millimeters. Because I'm actually going to get rid of part of this angle with another part. Yeah, that whole face actually pops out just a little bit. So if I sketch on this, actually, if the whole thing pops out, I could probably sketch on this, and then convert this corner. This whole thing pops out to about here. wide. So 50, 69, so 57. Up. 38.5. Okay. And it pops out so that it is actually proud of that surface. I could probably get the dimension here. It's about 7.5, so let's see if that does it. Yes, good. I'm going to save that. It looks like I have another extrusion. Actually, a couple more extrusions here. I should actually pull that from this side. So if I sketch, alright, so I'm going to save, and sketch here. Actually, take that edge and go out even further, and then down, and then in, and then down. Cool. Yeah, that's tricky. Alright, and that can just like come all the way in to here. I want to make sure that that line, that guy, incident. I'm going to make sure that that line and that line are collinear. Alright, how far down does that go? It's about 7.5. From here to here, 7.5. That's good. It's nice when your estimate is close. And the flat area of that's about 4. Then that shoves in. Five. That's right. It doesn't look quite right. Okay. And that goes all the way to this vertex. I'm starting to see something kind of not quite line up, so I'm just going to adjust this by moving this face. That looks like it actually lines up too. So I'm going to sketch here, convert that, and extrude it up to here. Okay, save. Now I should see if this thing shells. Okay. Yes, it still shells. Things are looking good. If at some point, like if it didn't shell right here, I would probably roll back a few of the features I just added and see like how many of them I need to get rid of for the shell to actually work. At some point, I'm not going to be able to make this thing shell anymore, and I'll, just shell what I can on the inside here and continue building on the outside and inside. I just want to try and get the shell to reflect as much of the outside geometry as possible, so I have less building to do on the inside of this part here. So that's looking pretty good. Oops, I did not mean to add it to favorites. I don't even know what that means. I'm going to delete this feature, save one more time, and find a few more features to build. Okay, what else do we have here? Well, I do see for sure a chamfer that goes around most of this piece. Normally, I would wait on doing any like chamfers or fillets until after you've done your shell. This one, though, happens to be a pretty large fillet. It looks like it's about 3 millimeters in one direction, and is it the same 3 in this direction? Pretty close, maybe only about 2.5. I'm not sure which is which right now. It looks like maybe I have those backwards. Let's do 2.5 and 3. Yeah, that's right. Full preview, looks like it does make it all the way around. So that's looking pretty good. Let's say okay. And again, especially after a feature like a chamfer, I would highly recommend trying your shell one more time just to see. Okay. So notice my shell actually failed. Oh, it didn't fail. It gave me a warning, probably because of that chamfer, but it did actually succeed. So I'm going to try that again and just see what that warning said. I kind of just breezed right through it. So I'm going to shell, say OK. The thickness value is greater than a minimum radius of curvature. It might succeed. I see. OK. Probably what happened is, yeah, it looks like it did it worked. And then my geometry looks okay. I have one solid body still, so that warning did not apply to this situation. So right now, that works. So I'm going to leave it in here. Cool. But that's why you check. Okay, what else do we have here? It looks like I've got something kind of interesting up here to try and do. Is that angled in? It is angled in a little bit too. So I'm going to try something here really quick. I'm going to sketch on this surface. try and make the feature that I'm looking at, which is a little bit tricky. It looks like, is that a curve? No, it's kind of more of a, yeah, that's really strange. Kind of comes down like this, like this. This might end up being one of those things that I leave out of this model because it is a little funky. But we'll see if I can get it to resolve. It's got this like kind of weird curve thing going on. And that's also going to be like kind of difficult to measure. I can certainly try my darndest. It's like 2. That is about, yeah, let's 12 down. That is about 5, and this is about 12. Okay, that's actually pretty close. All right, let's see how this goes. This is going to extrude the other way, all the way up to the next. Actually, we can go all the way to here. You know what? I could probably go all the way across here. Yeah, that's what it looks like. It's kind of weird, but okay. I'm going to try my shell again just to see if that made a difference. Now it looks like it came through, so that's good. Let's delete that again. Okay, save it. And actually, I'm going to take a quick look really quick at our time. So let's go to face cam really quick. It's been recording for just about an hour. All right, so I'm going to actually wrap this up. I said I would sort of break this into hour-long videos. So maybe for next time, I'll try and get this camera to be a little more interesting so that it's looking at what I'm measuring while I'm measuring it a little bit more. But I suppose we've got, let's see, we have a pretty good start on my gun shape, and I guess just to leave this in here for now, I have, oops, let me delete that. I have been able to get this thing to shell for me. The method I've been trying to use here is shell early, shell often, and make sure the features that you're building do in fact end up with the right geometry on the inside here. So far this thing is looking pretty close to, let's see if I can put this on the screen too, and then like hide that. All right, I don't know if you can see this or not, but it's starting to get pretty close to like the overall shape of this white part here. And that's what I'm shooting for. So I'm willing to bet maybe another half an hour worth of time, and I'll get most of the features built into this white part in order to do the shell. And then we can start moving on to one of these other parts. So thanks again, guys, for tuning in. I'll make a list of the few things that we covered here, namely some really basic kind of hack together methods for building out the dimension volume of the main area of your gun. Some and then basically like checking with lots of shells in between each of the features that you're building to make sure that eventually when you want to shell the inside of your gun that it will work. Also kind of thrown in here are a couple minor fix-its with features called move face. And that's when, after dimensioning things, kind of quickly on here, I found a few surfaces that like maybe were supposed to line up but weren't quite lined up. Rather than going back into my features and tweaking dimensions, I can, again, kind of another hack, select a face and move it a little bit in or out to match what my model is actually supposed to look like. So I'm thinking the next video for this build gun, like I said, we'll get through the shell, and I'll start building in some of the maybe like the internal features, some of the bosses and ribs inside my gun. I'll have to take it apart. But that's fun too. And then probably the next big thing that I'll do after that is actually start to build this handle. For most of you guys who are building one of these at home, the shell is going to be tricky, and then actually getting like the organic forms of this handle are also going to be tricky. So I'd like to try and get through at least those things in video. I'm not sure if I'll get through the entire build of the entire gun because the rest of it's pretty straightforward, I think. I will eventually move some parts into an assembly and show you how to import them and get everything mating correctly, but we'll get there. So, all right, thanks guys. We'll see you in class.